Childcare costs have already been rising at nearly double the rate of inflation, and now experts are warning the country could be on the brink of a so-called childcare funding cliff by the end of this month. That's when COVID-era relief money expires. And here with me today is Elsa Hogin, president of the Denver Preschool Program, and Don Alexander, executive director at the Early Childhood Education Association of Colorado. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, thank you.
Well, first, we want to go over some details, some data. In 2021, Congress passed the American Rescue Plan, which included a lifeline to child care providers during the pandemic. Colorado received $286 million in grants to cover staffing costs, rent, mental health support for children and educators, and PPE, which went to more than 2,400 centers. A survey from the National Association for the Education of Young Children gathered that 31% of centers wouldn't have survived without the extra funding. So, Don, let me ask you, how have you seen this money impact child care centers throughout the state?
It was definitely helpful. That started in February of 2022. The reality is that funding ended 9 months later. There's been 1/10 bonus payment that came out this summer, but programs have been without the funding in the interim. The remainder of the stabilization funds went to various projects at the state level to support programs in other ways rather than direct fiscal support.
So, Elsa, how do you think the fiscal cliff will impact centers in Denver?
Well, it is actually going to be substantial because this has been historic funding. We have not had this level of funding for early education at the national level or in Colorado. And the reality is, what we have to remember is that we had a system that is imperfect. It was not working before the pandemic. What the pandemic did is it provided that help, maybe a Band-Aid, to get us through the pandemic process, but now we're back to the problem that we didn't solve. So the funding was not solved by saying this is what we have happened. But in Colorado, we got $465 million of ARPA funding. That is a lot of money for early childhood. And it is what allowed us to stay open, and is what allowed us to stay, to be able to help parents as they were surviving the pandemic.
You know, Colorado started its universal preschool program this fall for 4-year-olds.
Yes.
As demand increases for that, parents are concerned about the lack of availability for infants and toddlers. 15% of families with 4-year-olds can't find child care. That need nearly doubles for families with children under 12 months. Scary. According to this is according to an Early Milestones Colorado survey. So, Don, what can the state and child care facilities do to increase capacity?
Well, they've been doing a lot of work over the past couple of years with E&E grants to fund new programming around the state, and so we have seen an increase in capacity. The problem is that increase in capacity has actually made our workforce thin out across larger numbers of programs. So what we have now is a huge issue, a huge demand for workforce. We have programs that do not have classrooms open because they can't find anyone to work in them. And until they can, we're not going to be able to see an actual increase in the number of children served.
How do you get people to apply and join?
Well, I would ask that people turn a blind ear to what they've been hearing nationally in terms of not being able to afford these positions. I think that it is a great opportunity for people to join into the workforce for early childhood. If you have a passion for children, come do that. We've got programs that'll pay for a portion or all of your child care costs for the kids that are in care. If you want to start your own business, you can run a family child care home from your own home. I did that. I raised my 3 children in my licensed family child care home, and it made a huge difference for us financially as a family, but also helped us to serve the community. So it's just an awareness to get people out there and engaged.
So as funding comes to an end, facilities are going to have to address staffing shortages. 15% of early childhood educators in Colorado are living in poverty, compared with 2% of those who work in K-8 education. That's according to an analysis by the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment at UC Berkeley. Elsa, why do you think wages in early education don't reflect the skilled work they do?
Yes. So what we have to remember is K-12 education in this country is free. That is not the case in early education. Early education cost is primarily paid by the parents. Despite all the funding opportunities that we have done and that we have given, like the Denver Preschool program, we have parents that cannot afford to make that investment. It is expensive. It costs more than tuition for a college education, and we continue to look at it as a responsibility with the parents, which the reality is the responsibility of the community. What kind of community do we want to have? When we talk about K-12 and even higher ed, we talk about investment in education because it's our future workforce. Our young children are also our future workforce. Guess what they're going to be? And what we also know is that 90% of a child's brain develops before they start kindergarten. And we're not making the investments at the time when we can make the highest difference. We know that return on investment is much higher. So I think the problem that we're having in early education is a financial model that doesn't work. When we don't have enough money coming into the centers, they cannot afford to pay for the salaries that are there. And as you said, the cost of care is already very high. We cannot ask parents to pay anymore. This problem needs to be addressed at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level. It is a combination of funding along with the parents to be able to do it. So when we lose the federal funding, we're losing a huge chunk that has happened in the last 2 years, and only a few communities like Denver have an organization like the Denver Preschool program that can come in and supplement the resources that providers need to be able to pay the wages that our workforce deserves.
Well, it's hard for parents with one kid, but can you imagine parents with multiple
absolutely.
children, especially at that age? So what other options do parents have?
So unfortunately, they have to decide, is there anyone else in their family or their community that can do care for them, right? That is not licensed or that sort of thing. That's definitely an option out there. Or they have to make the hard decision who stays home. So if you're staying home, much like I decided to do with my 3 children, consider opening a family child care home.
And Elsa, CBS News Colorado talked to you last summer about the crisis surrounding the issue. How do you think things have changed, if at all?
Yes, they have changed.
Okay.
Will have to say, we have a new department of early childhood in Colorado. We have a department of early childhood. We have universal preschool at the state level, which I think is a significant shift of where we were a year ago. And now we have some resources that can be funded for families much more effective. That means Denver Preschool program is now working with 3-year-olds. That's what happens when you have funding at the state level.
So big changes. Well,
big changes.
You. Yes, Elsa, Don, thank you so much for joining us today and having this important conversation. The American Rescue Plan child care funding will expire on September 30th. For more information about the child care crisis in our state, just head to cbscolorado.com. We'll be right back.